We rolled up to Jamal's little sister's wedding a whole 40 minutes before the ceremony was set to start. My husband, Jamal, had been on edge the entire drive, even though it was his sister, Keisha, getting married, not him. He kept checking his phone, tapping out replies, then angling the screen away and telling me not to ask a bunch of questions. I just chalked it up to all the family chaos. Inside the lavish event hall on the outskirts of Atlanta, the crystal chandeliers were already glowing. Florists were fussing over the big white peonies, and waiters were setting out champagne flutes. On the main table, place cards with the names of the closest family members were all lined up. My spot was right there, to the right of Jamal. I touched the card, thinking that at least for tonight, we'd get to sit next to each other in peace. A few minutes later, my mother-in-law, Mama Rose, came over, snatched up my card, and moved it to a far-off table by a pillar. "There must be a mistake," I said to her calmly. She didn't even look at me, just kept straightening the napkin next to her son's plate. "Ain't no mistake. You'll be sitting with the photographer's assistants. A chair just opened up over there. But my name is written right here." "Not anymore, it ain't," Mama Rose shot back, crumpling the card in her palm. Then she motioned for the event coordinator to set another place next to Jamal. My husband stood just 2 steps away, acting like he was fascinated by the wedding menu. I asked him, "Jamal, do you see what's happening right now?" He mumbled, "Don't start, Imani. Today is Keisha's big day. Mama just wants everything to go smooth." In our family, keeping it smooth always meant one thing. I was the one who had to shut up. Through a side entrance, Chantel appeared. She was the chief commercial officer at Jamal's construction company and had been his shadow at every meeting for the last 6 months. A tall, light-skinned woman in an emerald green dress. She was holding a silver clutch and a bouquet for the bride. Mama Rose rushed right over to her, wrapped her in a big hug, and led her to the head table. "Chantel, baby, you're gonna sit right here next to Jamal," she announced, loud enough for all the relatives and the waitstaff to hear. "You're practically family now." Chantel put on a show of being embarrassed. "Oh, but won't Imani feel some type of way?" My mother-in-law just smirked. "Imani is a grown woman. She needs to understand that the one who truly supports a man is the one who should be sitting by his side." Then she turned to me. "She's sitting next to my son. Don't you dare ruin Keisha's wedding." I looked at Jamal. He dropped his eyes but didn't say a single word to his mother. Chantel took my chair, laid her hand on the back of his, and asked a waiter if she could swap her champagne for a glass of white wine. The whole thing felt rehearsed. They left me a spot at the back table, next to the technical vendors I didn't even know. Between our table and the stage stood a massive pillar, blocking half the view of the hall. It was clear Mama Rose didn't just want to seat her son's mistress next to him. She wanted me completely erased from the family photos. I could have made a scene, demanded an explanation, and stormed out. That's probably exactly what they were hoping for. Jamal was already holding his phone like he was getting ready to record my reaction. So instead, I just said, "Fine, let her sit there, but I want my name card back." Mama Rose laughed. "What you need that for? You gonna run and complain to somebody about how you were humiliated?" "I like to keep mementos," I said, looking at the coordinator. The young man with the earpiece picked up the crumpled card from the table and was about to hand it to me, but Mama Rose snatched it from him. "Throw it out. It ain't needed anymore." Just then, Mrs. Loretta Jackson, the owner of Jackson Events and the head planner for the whole wedding, walked up to our group. I'd known her for almost 3 years. Her agency was the biggest client for my logistics company. We handled the equipment, decor, and transport for dozens of her events. Mrs. Jackson recognized me instantly, but, like a true professional, showed no surprise. She just told the coordinator, "We don't throw away any guest cards until the reception is over. Keep this one in the official folder." Mama Rose asked, annoyed, why the planner was getting involved in family seating arrangements. Mrs. Jackson replied softly, "I am responsible for the floor plan that was approved by the bride and groom. And in that approved plan, Mrs. Imani was seated next to her husband. My mother-in-law huffed. "Well, the plan has changed. I'm the mother of the bride, and I have the right to make decisions." "Of course," Mrs. Jackson said smoothly. "I just ask that we document the change, so there are no questions later." She glanced at me, and I saw a flash of understanding in her eyes. I gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of my head, signaling that she didn't need to step in just yet. It was important for me to see who was in on this performance, and just how far they were willing to take it. You see, Mrs. Jackson wasn't just organizing a wedding. In 1 week, her agency and my company were scheduled to sign a 3-year, $10 million contract. My company would become the primary supplier of staging, equipment, and logistics for her entire network of events. Jamal knew about the contract, but he just thought of Mrs. Jackson as some party planner I knew. He never took any interest in my work, calling it hauling tables and chairs. In reality, I had built my business from the ground up. After leaving my job at a bank, I was now managing 100 employees and overseeing projects all across the state. It was just more convenient for my husband to paint me as a woman who worked for fun and depended on his salary. His mother repeated that version of the story to anyone who would listen. Jamal came over to me as guests started gathering in the foyer. "Imani, don't make a tragedy out of the seating," he said. "Chantel helped Keisha a lot with paperwork and the wedding gift. Mama just wanted to thank her. A thank you doesn't usually involve removing a man's wife from his side. You take everything so personally." "It is personal. We're talking about my seat next to my husband." Jamal lowered his voice. "Look, we were going to have a talk after the wedding anyway. Our relationship has been over for a long time. Chantel. She understands me better." His voice turned cold. "If you keep quiet today, we can part ways peacefully." I asked him, "And if I don't?" He glanced over at the photographers. "Then everyone here will see exactly why you're impossible to live with. So that's why they chose the wedding. The relatives, the photographers, the staff, and a few hundred guests were all supposed to be witnesses to my hysterical breakdown." Jamal and his mother had their story ready. The jealous wife is acting out, ruining her sister-in-law's most important day. If I left, they'd say I dramatically abandoned the family. If I stayed at the back table, Chantel would look like Jamal's legitimate partner. I smiled. "Don't you worry, I'll stay till the very end." Jamal let out a breath of relief, taking my words as a surrender. He didn't notice that Mrs. Jackson was standing nearby, having heard our entire conversation. When the ceremony started, I took a seat in the third row. Mama Rose made sure to seat Chantel right next to Jamal and even asked the photographer to get a shot of them together. The bride, Keisha, noticed the change and frowned, but her mother whispered something to her right before she walked down the aisle. Keisha shot an apologetic look my way, but the music had already started. I didn't want to drag her into this mess. This day belonged to her, and none of this was her fault. So I smiled as she walked down the aisle and was the first to stand and applaud when they were pronounced husband and wife. But inside me, the very last excuse I had ever made for Jamal crumbled into dust. He wasn't just weak and bending to his mother's will. He had willingly, in front of his entire family, allowed his wife to be replaced. At the back table with me were the camera operator, the florist's assistant, the band's driver, and an older gentleman I first thought was a relative of the groom. He introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, the owner of the venue, Mrs. Jackson had deliberately moved him to our table after the seating chart was changed. He asked me politely, "Can you see the stage all right from here?" I replied, "The pillar is a bit in the way, but that's not my biggest problem today." He noticed my name card, which the coordinator had managed to return to me. "That's strange," he said. "In the final floor plan I saw, your seat was at the main table." I just shrugged. Family adjustments. Mr. Henderson glanced toward Mama Rose, but didn't ask anything else. A few minutes later, however, he had an employee move our entire table a couple of feet to the side, giving me a clear view of the newlyweds. Mama Rose noticed the shift and marched over. "The tables are not to be moved," she declared to the coordinator. Mr. Henderson answered calmly, "They can be, if they're blocking a guest's view of the celebration." My mother-in-law, not knowing who he was, snapped, "The service staff is sitting here. It's not essential for them to see the stage." I felt the florist's assistant next to me tense up. Mr. Henderson simply said, "Ma'am, I own this complex." Mama Rose's tone changed instantly. "Oh, forgive me. I thought you were with the technical crew. We just want to ensure the family table remains the main focus." He replied coolly, "The main table doesn't become any less important just because the other guests can see the party." She gave a tight, fake smile and walked away. I looked at the people at our table. The driver said quietly, "Now I see why some clients treat staff like furniture." I replied, "Not all clients are like that." The florist's assistant shared that earlier that morning, Mama Rose had demanded their crew's meals be removed from the common room, saying that vendors shouldn't eat near the guests. I knew for a fact that Mrs. Jackson always wrote proper meals and treatment for the event staff into her contracts. That meant my mother-in-law wasn't just meddling with seating, but with the entire organization, asserting her power over anyone she considered beneath her. I sent a short text to Mrs. Jackson, "Check on the staff's meals." She replied instantly, "Already handled." All incidents have been documented. At the main table, Chantel was practically draped over Jamal. She leaned in close, straightened his tie, and laughed at every word Mama Rose said. The photographer was regularly capturing the three of them together. My mother-in-law was glowing with satisfaction. During the first toast, she said, "A family is held up by women who know how to support their men, not compete with them. Keisha has found a husband like that, and I hope my son, too, will soon find his own true family happiness." Several relatives glanced in my direction. Jamal didn't stop his mother. Chantel lowered her eyes with fake modesty. I raised my glass to the newlyweds, acting as if the toast had nothing to do with me. Mrs. Jackson came over, pretending to check on the food service, and quietly asked, "Amani, do you need me to step in?" "Not yet. Keisha's wedding isn't going to turn into our corporate dispute. This is more than a family dispute now," she replied. Mama Rose has been instructing the staff to introduce Chantel as Jamal's wife for photographs. She also requested that your last name be removed from the list of family guests. I asked, "Who gave her access to the system?" The bride's assistant handed her the tablet, not understanding the implications. "We've saved the original version and all subsequent changes." "Mrs. Like Izia," Jackson added. Jamal also signed off on the seating adjustment. So he didn't just obey his mother, he was an active participant. The information didn't surprise me, but it erased any lingering doubt. For months, Jamal had been coming home late, hiding his phone, and saying my work was destroying my femininity. Mama Rose had suddenly started praising Chantel, inviting her to family dinners, and talking in front of me about how important it was for a man to have a calm assistant by his side. I knew something was going on, but Jamal had always denied he was cheating. Today, he had put his own signature on a document that put his mistress in his wife's place. Even if there was nothing physical between them, the betrayal was already complete. But from the way Chantel's hand lingered on his arm, there was no doubt about that either. During a course change, Jamal walked over to me. He looked annoyed, even though he'd gotten everything he wanted. "Why are you talking to the planner?" he asked. "We work together." "Since when?" "For the last 3 years. She's not my vendor, she's my client." Jamal frowned. "You never told me. You never asked." He looked over at Mrs. Jackson, who was now talking with Mr. Henderson. "I hope you're not complaining to her about family business." "I haven't said a word. She sees everything for herself." My husband clenched his jaw. "Don't you dare use your business connections to humiliate my mother. Your mother is doing a fine job of that all on her own." Jamal leaned in and whispered, "After this wedding, we're filing for divorce. I'll let you keep the apartment and the car, as long as you don't make a claim on the lake house or my company." "Your company is drowning in debt," I replied. He flinched. "How do you know that?" "It's in the public financial records. It's not your business." "Then why are you offering to let me not make a claim on it?" Jamal said it was to wrap everything up cleanly. Chantel prepared an agreement. I looked over at the main table. His mistress hadn't just taken my chair. She was already drawing up the terms of my exit. "Bring me the document," I said. "I want to see it." My husband smiled, thinking I was ready to surrender. 20 minutes later, Chantel handed Jamal a thin folder. He placed it in front of me, right between my dinner plates. According to the agreement, I would waive any and all claims to his company and the lake house we built on land that was purchased with my money. In return, I would get the condo that I owned before we were married and the car that was leased by my own firm. Jamal was generously offering me my own property. Furthermore, the document stated that I confirmed I had not participated in the financing of his business. This was a flat-out lie. 5 years ago, my company had given him an interest-free loan for $250,000. The repayment date had long passed, but Jamal had asked me not to rush him. Now, he wanted me to voluntarily erase that debt. I asked who drafted the agreement. Jamal said, "Chantel worked it out with a lawyer. Does she know about the loan from my company?" "There was no loan." "You were helping your husband." "The help was formalized with a contract and is reflected in my company's accounting." He said, irritated, "You can't turn everything into a business transaction. You're the one who brought a legal agreement to a wedding and demanded I walk away from $250,000. Who's the one turning everything into business?" Jamal glanced around, checking if anyone was listening. But the table was full of people his mother considered the help. The camera operator quietly slipped off his headphones, and Mr. Henderson paused mid-bite. Everyone had heard the conversation. I closed the folder. "I'm not signing anything tonight." Jamal hissed, "I knew you'd try to bargain. This isn't a negotiation. I'm simply reading the documents." Don't embarrass me in front of people. In front of who? The people your mother stuck behind a pillar? He realized the conversation was getting dangerous and tried to grab the folder. I held on to it. You gave this document to me. I'm keeping it for my records. It's confidential. It has my name and my assets in it. That means I have every right to show it to my lawyer. Jamal stormed off, not even trying to hide his anger. Mr. Henderson quietly said, "Keep the original. The security cameras will show that he was the one who handed you the folder." After the second toast, Mrs. Jackson asked me to join her in a private office. The head of venue security, her agency's lawyer, and the banquet manager were all there. On a screen, they were playing silent security footage. There was Mama Rose, switching the place cards. There was Jamal, signing the revised seating chart. There was Chantel, taking my seat, and my mother-in-law instructing an employee to remove my name from the family guest list. Mrs. Jackson said, "We have audio from the cameras in the hallway and near the service entrance. We don't record audio in the main hall, but our staff members are prepared to give statements." "Why are you collecting all of this?" I asked. "Because this situation has now impacted the contract and the security of this event," she answered. It turned out that earlier that morning, Jamal had introduced himself to Mrs. Jackson as a co-owner of my company. He told her that after the wedding, he would be personally overseeing the upcoming contract and asked her to direct all financial documents to Chantel. Chantel had then presented a business card with the title Director of Strategic Projects, Monroe Group. My maiden name was Monroe, and my company was called Monroe Logistics. Chantel had absolutely no connection to it. Jamal was banking on the idea that after the divorce, he could get a piece of my business or, at the very least, access to the $10 million contract through me. Mrs. Jackson had suspected fraud immediately but decided to wait for my arrival before acting. That's why she had been observing everything from the very beginning. "He really said he would be controlling our contract?" I asked. "Yes, and he claimed you were stepping back from the business for health reasons." I couldn't help but laugh. That morning alone, I had led 2 meetings, approved the quarterly budget, and driven to the wedding without the slightest issue. Jamal had invented a phantom illness to explain my future disappearance from my own business. Mrs. Jackson handed me a copy of an email he had sent from his own construction firm's corporate address. Attached was a draft of a supplementary agreement to our contract. It proposed that all payments be routed through Chantel's company, positioned as a coordinating operator. Her commission? 15%. On a 3-year, $10 million contract, they stood to make over $1 million for doing absolutely nothing. I asked the lawyer, "Did they get any documents from you?" "Only a general presentation and the draft, with no financial details. We signed nothing. The moment Mrs. Jackson saw you, she halted all data exchange." The event planner added, "I was intending to announce the selection of your company as our primary partner tonight. Jamal was likely counting on you signing the divorce papers and the loan waiver before that official news broke. Then he could present Chantel as our new coordinator." Their whole wedding spectacle wasn't just about personal humiliation. It was designed to create the illusion for a major client that I was no longer part of the family or the business. In my place, next to Jamal, was a woman who could be trusted with documents. I remembered how Mama Rose had deliberately placed Chantel at the head table and declared her practically family. Mama Rose might not have understood the corporate scheme, but she was helping to paint the right picture. Jamal wanted to show Mrs. Jackson his new family team, and he wanted to banish me to the vendor's table, as if I had no connection to the contract. He had no idea that the event planner had been working directly with me for 3 years and knew perfectly well who owned the company. Their entire plan was built on a familiar mistake. They mistook my composure for a lack of power. I said, "Don't do anything for now. This wedding needs to end without police or public accusations, as long as there's no threat to the documents or to people." The lawyer agreed but warned, "If they attempt to sign any papers on your behalf or access information, we are obligated to respond." I asked for copies of the emails and for the video footage to be saved. Mrs. Jackson looked at me intently. "Imani, our contract with you does not depend on your family circumstances. I've seen you lead projects through crises, but it is important for me to know that your company remains under your control." "It does," I answered, "and after tonight, that control will be even tighter." When I returned to the hall, Mama Rose was standing by my table. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "Guests noticed you disappeared." "I was discussing work." "At a wedding? You can't even be a wife for one evening." Mr. Henderson spoke up. The organizer herself invited Mrs. Imani to speak with her. My mother-in-law shot him a furious look. I wasn't asking the service staff. He calmly reminded her, I am the owner of this complex. Mama Rose went pale again. She was so used to sizing people up by their seat at a table that she had made the same mistake twice in one night. Keisha came over to us, looking distraught. Amani, I'm so sorry, she said quietly. I had no idea Mama was going to move you. I approved the plan, and you were supposed to be sitting next to Jamal. I told her, it's not your fault. Today is your day. But Mama said you and Jamal had already split up, and that Chantel was about to become part of the family. Did Jamal confirm that? I asked. Keisha nodded. He said it was all decided, and that you had agreed to it. I showed her the unsigned separation agreement. Nothing has been decided. The bride looked over at her brother at the head table, and for the first time, she saw what was happening without her mother's filter. Keisha wanted to march over and give me my seat back right then, but I stopped her. If you start arguing with your mother now, she'll just blame me for ruining your wedding. Go on, enjoy your party. We'll talk after. The bride started to cry. I'm so ashamed. The people who should be ashamed, I told her, are the ones who used your wedding for their own schemes. She hugged me and went back to her new husband. Mama Rose saw the hug and immediately went over to her son. They whispered about something and then Jamal headed toward me, his expression no longer annoyed but wary. What did you say to Keisha? He asked. The truth. Why are you dragging her into this? You're the ones who dragged her in by changing the seating chart and telling her I agreed to a divorce. Jamal lowered his voice. Just sign the papers now, and I'll explain to my sister that we're handling things peacefully. No. You want Mama to be stressed out at her own daughter's wedding? Your mother created this problem herself. My husband clenched his fists. Don't you talk about her like that. And how should I talk about the woman who sat your mistress in my seat? He shot back. Chantel is not my mistress. Then why is she preparing our divorce papers and calling herself a representative of my company? Jamal froze. I could see he wasn't expecting that question. Who told you that? So it's true. She's just helping with the contract. You don't know how to deal with major clients, and Chantel has the experience. I almost had to admire his audacity. He was standing at a wedding being organized by my biggest client, telling me that I didn't know how to work with clients. Mrs. Jackson knows exactly who runs the company, I said. She also saw the email you sent. Jamal's face went white. You talked to her about me? She read the email that you sent her. He tried to spin it as if he were acting in my best interest. I wanted to combine our capabilities. My construction firm could service the venues, and Chantel could coordinate the projects. And why was this done without my consent? Because you shoot down all of my ideas. I shoot down adding a middleman with a 15% commission. Jamal glanced at the back table, as if realizing for the first time that the people sitting there could be witnesses. We'll discuss this at home. We'll discuss this with our lawyers, I replied. And not at home, because you won't be coming home with me tonight. Chantel, sensing the plan was falling apart, decided to go public. When the MC passed the microphone to the relatives for toasts, she stood up. I want to congratulate Keisha and wish her to never be afraid of change. Sometimes, real love comes later than we expect, and it's important to have the courage to choose it. She looked directly at Jamal. Your family has become so dear to me. I'm especially grateful to Mama Rose for her trust and support. My mother-in-law beamed and started clapping. A few guests exchanged confused glances. The toast didn't sound like a congratulations to the bride. It sounded like an announcement of Chantel as Jamal's new woman. Mama Rose took the microphone next. Chantel is right. A family should embrace those who bring warmth into the home. It's not always the woman who has lived by a man's side for years who becomes his true support. Sometimes another woman takes that place, one who is more attentive, more feminine, and more grateful. She will be sitting next to my son, and not just for tonight. Jamal looked down at the floor but didn't stop his mother. The MC looked helplessly at Keisha. The bride, standing next to her husband, had gone pale. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even the guests who didn't know us understood they were witnessing the public banishment of a wife. I could have stayed silent, but now their words weren't just about me. My mother-in-law had hijacked her own daughter's wedding to introduce her son's mistress. I stood up and asked for the microphone. Mama Rose said, "There's no need to make a scene." I replied, "I want to congratulate the newlyweds." The MC handed me the mic. I looked at Keisha and her husband. I wish you both a lifetime of never letting relatives decide who is worthy of sitting beside you. A family doesn't start with a seating chart or the approval of elders. It starts with the honesty between two people. Today is your day. and you are not responsible for anyone else's choices. Then I handed the microphone back, without mentioning Jamal or Chantel by name. The guests applauded much louder than they had after my mother-in-law's toast. Mama Rose's face turned beet red. Jamal came over and hissed, "You just had to put on a show, didn't you?" I congratulated your sister. Your mother is the one who put on a show, announcing her son's mistress as his new wife. Don't call Chantel my mistress. Then ask her to show you her text messages. His face changed. I knew about the messages, and not just from his behavior. 2 days before the wedding, a notification from Chantel had popped up on the family iPad. After this reception, we can finally stop hiding. I had taken a picture of the screen but didn't bother to read the rest. That one line was enough. Jamal tried to deny it. That could have been about the contract. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot. He read it and said, "You're spying on me." The notification popped up on a shared device. "You're the one violating my personal life. You already have a personal life, separate from this marriage." He fell silent. Chantel watched us from her table, realizing there was no point in hiding anymore. She walked over. "Jamal, don't even bother explaining yourself. We don't need anyone's permission to be happy." I asked her, "Then why does your happiness require my signature on a document waiving a $250,000 debt and a commission from my contract?" Chantel replied, "That loan was paid back a long time ago. Show me the transaction record." Jamal jumped in, saying the payment was made in cash. He named a date from a year ago. On that exact day, he and I were in Canada together, a fact confirmed by plane tickets, hotel receipts, and credit card statements. I asked, "You paid back $250,000 in cash while we were out of the country?" Jamal started to get angry. I could have the date wrong. Chantel intervened. "All the documents are with the accountant. My accountant has no record of any repayment. Then your accountant must have made a mistake." Their story was unraveling right there at the wedding. Mrs. Jackson approached and asked us to step into a private room so we wouldn't disrupt the program. Her corporate lawyer and the head of security were already waiting. Jamal was furious. "Why are outsiders getting involved in a family conversation?" Mrs. Jackson replied, "Because you used my event to conduct a fraudulent business transaction and misrepresented yourselves as representatives of Amani's company." Chantel said, "It's all a misunderstanding. We're preparing a joint project." "I have no joint project with you," Mrs. Jackson stated flatly. All negotiations were conducted with Amani and her staff. Jamal tried to go on the offensive. "You're just choosing a supplier based on personal friendship. That's a conflict of interest." Mrs. Jackson remained calm. "We are choosing a company based on 3 years of excellent work, dozens of successful events, and an official bidding process. I only became aware of the personal circumstances today when your mother moved the CEO of that company to the technical staff's table and you introduced your mistress as her employee." Chantel turned white. "Don't call me his mistress." "Then explain the email where you said that, after tonight, you could stop hiding," I replied. Jamal looked at me with pure hatred. "You set me up." "No, I came to a wedding. You're the one who set the trap, putting that agreement on the table and sending false information to my client." Mrs. Jackson handed him a printout of his email. "In this email, you write that Amani is stepping down from her leadership role due to her health. That is a lie. You propose routing payments through Chantel's company and refer to yourself as a co-owner of Monroe Logistics. On what grounds?" Jamal muttered, "We're married." "Marriage does not make you the owner of a legal entity whose shares were acquired by Amani before the wedding," the lawyer interjected. Chantel snapped. "Jamal said he would get half of it after the divorce." I looked at her. "So you weren't just planning a relationship, you were planning to carve up my company." She realized her mistake and tried to backtrack. "We were just discussing a hypothetical situation. With a 15% commission and specific routing numbers," Mrs. Jackson added. "Your company is now excluded from all negotiations. Any further attempts to obtain documents will be treated as corporate espionage." Chantel turned on Jamal. "You swore this was all worked out." He mumbled, "I thought she would sign." That phrase was quieter than the rest, but everyone heard it. Jamal thought I would just sign the papers after being publicly humiliated. Mama Rose was supposed to break me, Chantel was supposed to take my place, and the wedding photos were supposed to show my biggest client the new family power structure. I asked, "You brought your mistress to take my place to force me to give up my company and my money?" He said, "I wanted to resolve everything without a long, messy court battle. Through shame. Through reality. Our marriage is over." "It is now," I replied. But from here on out, reality will be determined by legal documents, not by your mother's seating chart. When we returned to the reception hall, the music had stopped. Mama Rose was arguing with Keisha near the stage. The bride was demanding they stop the toasts about Jamal and return the focus of the wedding to the actual newlyweds. The mother-in-law was accusing her daughter of being ungrateful. "I organized everything. I paid for everything. I invited everyone," she yelled. Mrs. Jackson walked over and clarified. The majority of the expenses were paid by Keisha and her fiancé, Anton. "Your contribution covered the deposit for the flowers and a portion of the menu." Mama Rose went pale. She had been telling relatives that she had gifted her daughter a lavish wedding, when in fact, the young couple had covered most of the budget themselves with a loan and their savings. Keisha saw her brother and asked, "Did you really bring Chantel here as your future wife and try to force Imani to sign divorce papers at my wedding?" Jamal replied, "Mama presented it all wrong. We just wanted to talk calmly." "Then why did you stick Imani behind a pillar?" "Because Mama wanted to avoid a conflict." Keisha laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Avoid a conflict by humiliating her in front of 200 guests?" Mama Rose snapped. "Don't you dare speak to your brother in that tone. Chantel will be part of this family soon enough." The bride looked at the mistress and replied, "Not at my wedding, and not at my table." She walked to the head table, picked up Chantel's place card, and moved it to an empty seat by the exit. Then she placed a new, handwritten card with my name in front of my original chair. "Imani, please, sit here." I replied, "Thank you, Keisha, but I'll stay at my table. The people here were disrespected by your mother tonight just as much as I was." Keisha nodded. She didn't push me to rejoin a family that had just shown its true colors. Instead, she asked the MC to continue the program without any more toasts from the relatives. Music started playing again, but the atmosphere had changed. Guests were no longer looking at me like a rejected wife. They were looking at Jamal, Chantel, and Mama Rose. My mother-in-law went to Mrs. Jackson and demanded she delete all recordings and not spread family information. The organizer replied, "The video materials are used for venue security and are stored according to our contract. We do not distribute anything publicly." "Then make Imani leave the wedding. She's provoking a conflict." Mrs. Jackson calmly noted, "Imani was invited by the bride and is my business partner. There are no grounds to remove her. I am the mother of the bride, which is precisely why I recommend you return to your daughter and allow her to enjoy the rest of her celebration without further humiliating the guests." Mama Rose was not used to people ignoring her self-proclaimed status. She turned to me. "You've turned the organizers against our family." I replied, "They saw everything with their own eyes. You stayed silent on purpose, just so you could paint us as monsters later. If I had screamed, you would have called me hysterical. I stayed silent, and now you accuse me of being calculating. What reaction, exactly, would have been acceptable to you?" My mother-in-law said, "You should have given up your seat and left with dignity." So, the only correct reaction was surrender. She didn't answer, because that was exactly what she meant. Meanwhile, Chantel was confronting Jamal near the coat check. I overheard her ask, "You really don't have a stake in her company?" He replied, "It could have all been sorted out after the divorce." "You said the firm was started during the marriage." "It doesn't matter, the documents can be challenged." "And the $250,000 debt? We would have worked something out." Chantel took a step back. Her interest in Jamal clearly included more than just love. She had been counting on getting access to my business, my client, and my money. Realizing her man controlled none of what he'd promised, she was reassessing her risk. I walked up to them and said, "Give me back the folder." Jamal replied, "It belongs to my lawyer. You handed it to me. It contains my personal data and false statements. Until I receive a copy, the original will remain with my lawyer." Chantel said, "We can prepare a different version. You will not be preparing anything for me ever again. All negotiations will be through our legal representatives." She tried to put on an air of dignity. "I never meant to cause you any pain. You sat in my seat, you gave a toast about finding new love, and you prepared a document for me to waive a massive debt. Which of those steps was an accident?" Chantel said nothing. Jamal told her to leave, but she refused. "I was invited by Mama Rose." "Then go sit next to her," he shot back. His mistress looked at him with contempt. "You let your mother orchestrate this whole mess, and now you're trying to make me the villain." He said, "You should have verified the information about the company. You should have told the truth." Their relationship began to crumble before the wedding was even over. Each of them had thought the other would be their ticket to a payday, but but both had built their plans on my property. When it became clear I wouldn't sign, their love quickly turned into mutual accusations. Closer to midnight, the MC announced the final dance for the newlyweds. I stood at my back table, next to the people who had supported me without any obligation. Keisha danced with her husband, trying not to look at her mother and brother. Jamal stood alone against Solid. Sol had gone to the ladies' room and never came back. Mama Rose sat at the head table with a face like stone. Her grand plan was supposed to show the whole family who was truly worthy of a place by her son's side. In the end, all the guests saw was a son who betrayed his wife, a mistress who was only interested in money, and a mother who used her daughter's wedding to stage someone else's divorce. Mrs. Jackson came over to me before the reception ended. I was going to announce the contract tonight, but I think it's better to do it officially tomorrow. I agree, I said. Keisha should remember her own wedding, not my work. The organizer said, after what I witnessed tonight, I'm even more confident in our choice of your company. You didn't let a personal conflict derail an entire event. Thank you, I replied, but the decision should be based on the bid. It is. Tonight, I just got to see how you behave in a crisis. For a major partner, that's just as important as the numbers on a page. The next morning, Jamal didn't come home. He had stayed at his mother's but sent me a text. You humiliated me in front of my client and my family. If you want a peaceful divorce, drop all claims to the company. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, David, whom I had worked with for years. We met in my office with my CFO. The loan agreement with Jamal's construction company was ironclad. The repayment date had passed 8 months ago, and interest was still accruing. Before the wedding, I had no intention of demanding the money immediately. Now it was clear. My husband had wanted to use the divorce to get out of his financial obligations and gain access to my new contract. That same day, Jackson Events officially announced my company as the winner of the tender. The contract was signed for 3 years, with an option to extend. Jamal learned the news from the business press and showed up at my office unannounced. Security informed me that he was demanding a meeting as the owner's husband. I allowed him up to the conference room but asked my lawyer to be present. Jamal walked in, fuming. You stole the project that I brought in. I've been in negotiations with Mrs. Jackson for 3 years. You proposed a scheme to funnel payments to your mistress. Chantal est professionnelle. Her company was founded 2 months ago and has no employees. He sat down and tried to speak calmly. Let's not destroy everything over one bad wedding. I'll break things off with Chantal. Mama will apologize, and you'll include my firm in the contract as a construction subcontractor. Your company didn't go through the bidding process. We're family. Yesterday, you announced our marriage was over. I was angry. The divorce folder was prepared in advance. Jamal looked at my lawyer. We don't need a third party here. David replied. After the attempt to fraudulently intercept a commercial contract and waive a significant debt, all negotiations will be conducted with legal counsel present. Jamal proposed a settlement. He would acknowledge a debt of $100,000 instead of the full $250,000, and I wouldn't tell the client about his emails. I reminded him that the client had already received the emails from him directly. Then retract your complaint, he demanded. Mrs. Jackson could destroy my reputation. She's not publicizing anything, but she's under no obligation to work with you. My husband raised his voice. You always thought you were smarter than everyone. No, I replied. I just read the documents. While you were counting on your mother to seat your mistress in my chair so I'd sign everything out of shame? He admitted the whole wedding idea was Mama Rose's. His mother believed that if Chantal was publicly accepted as part of the family, I would understand that resistance was futile. Jamal had planned to hand me the agreement after the second toast, get my signature, and immediately introduce Chantal to Mrs. Jackson as the new project coordinator. I thought you wouldn't want to cause a scandal, he said. And you were right about that. Then why didn't you sign? Avoiding a scandal is not the same as consent. You confused good manners with weakness. My lawyer sent an official demand for the debt. Jamal's construction company couldn't pay the full amount. It was buried in other loans and overdue payments to suppliers. We offered a payment plan secured by his share of the lake house. My husband refused, claiming he needed the house for his new family. With Chantal? I asked. That's none of your business anymore, he shot back. But a week later, we found out Chantal had resigned and taken a portion of his client base with her. Their romance ended almost immediately after the wedding. She realized the assets he had promised didn't belong to him, and his company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Mama Rose called me and demanded I save her son's business. You gave him that money as his wife, and now you're using a contract against the family, she said. I replied. The money belonged to my company, which has employees and its own obligations. Jamal would have paid it all back if he'd gotten the contract. He tried to get that contract through lies and a shell company. Chantel confused him. Who moved my place card and sat her next to him? My mother-in-law fell silent. Then she said, I didn't know about the money. But you knew they were lovers. Jamal said your marriage was effectively over. You could have asked me. You wouldn't have let him go peacefully anyway. She felt no remorse for the humiliation. She was only worried about the consequences for her son. Mama Rose suggested we meet and settle things woman to woman. I agreed, but only with my lawyer and Keisha present. At the meeting, my mother-in-law brought out the crumpled place card from the wedding. I saved it, she said. Here, if it's so important to you. I placed the card on the table. What's important isn't the name on a piece of paper. It's that you decided you could replace me and use your daughter's wedding to do it. Mama Rose replied. I just wanted my son to be happy. Keisha said quietly, but you didn't care about my happiness that day, did you? My mother-in-law turned to her daughter. Everything I did was for this family. No, Mama, Keisha replied. You turned my wedding into a ceremony to welcome your son's mistress. Guests are still asking me what happened. I can't even look at my wedding photos because in half of them, Chantel is sitting next to Jamal, and Imani is hidden behind a pillar. Mama Rose said, the photographer could fix that. Keisha shook her head. The problem isn't the pictures. The problem is you decided you have the right to appoint people as family members and kick out anyone who is inconvenient for you. I never expected Keisha to stand up to her mother so directly. My mother-in-law accused us both of being ungrateful and stormed out. A few days later, she started telling relatives that I had sabotaged Jamal's contract out of revenge for his affair. But Mrs. Jackson had provided an official letter stating his firm had never even participated in the tender, and his proposal for a middleman was rejected for lack of experience and transparency. The facts were stronger than the family's narrative. Even the relatives who usually sided with Mama Rose started asking questions. The divorce took 8 months. Jamal demanded half of my company, claiming the business had grown during our marriage. But the documents clearly showed the firm was registered 2 years before our wedding. The initial capital was all mine, and all shares remained in my name. The most he could claim was a portion of the increase in value, and only if he could prove he made a personal contribution to that growth. No such contribution existed. On the contrary, my company had financed his. The lake house was divided, taking into account the value of the land and my investments. Jamal received a cash settlement for a portion of the construction costs, but his share was significantly smaller than he expected. His construction company avoided bankruptcy thanks to a debt restructuring. I didn't try to destroy his business. I agreed to a 5-year payment plan secured by his assets and a restriction on any major transactions without notifying his creditor. He kept his business but lost the freedom to spend money without oversight. For the first time, my husband had to face the consequences of his own decisions without his mother or his wife cleaning up the mess. Chantel moved to another city and got a job at a real estate development firm. Before leaving, she wrote me a letter, claiming Jamal had told her our divorce was long since agreed upon and had promised her a position in their merged company. She apologized for her wedding toast, but added, I thought you had already accepted the situation. I replied with a single line. Accepting someone else's lie and agreeing to participate in a humiliation are two very different things. She never wrote again. I didn't see her as the sole villain. She had willingly taken the seat offered to her, but it was Jamal and his mother who had set the chair. A few months later, Keisha invited me over to see her wedding photos. She had deleted the shots where Mama Rose was fawning over Chantel, but kept a few of the group pictures. I don't want to completely rewrite the day, she explained. This is part of the truth, too. In one photo, I was at the back table, sitting next to the camera operator, the florist's assistant, the driver, and the venue owner. We were all laughing at someone's joke. Keisha said, It's strange, but in this picture, you look happier than anyone. I replied, That's because I was sitting next to people who didn't need to prove their power by their place at a table. Mrs. Jackson became not only a client but a good friend. Our contract was a massive success, and the volume of projects nearly doubled. One evening at a business dinner, she said, I often think about that wedding. Not my wedding, I laughed. Keisha's. Exactly. What struck me was that you never demanded we stop the reception right then and there. I replied, If the situation had threatened people or the documents, I would have. But Keisha didn't deserve to lose her special day because of her brother. The organizer smiled. And that's why I trust you with my biggest projects. You know the difference between personal pain and professional responsibility. Mama Rose didn't speak to me for a long time. Then one day, she showed up at my office without an appointment. My assistant told me an older woman was waiting in the lobby and refused to state her purpose. I had her brought to the conference room. My former mother-in-law looked tired. Jamal barely speaks to me, she said. He blames me for making him bring Chantel to the wedding. Did you make him? I suggested it, he agreed. Now he says he lost his wife and a major contract because of me. I replied, he lost them because of his own decisions. Don't let him hide behind you again. She asked, will you ever forgive me? Maybe, but forgiveness doesn't mean we'll ever be close. You wanted to show me that someone else could stand next to Jamal. And I did, she said. Yes, you did. And you also showed me that after 12 years of marriage, you still saw me as a temporary fixture. Mama Rose looked down. Chantel was just so agreeable. She agreed with everything I said because she was hoping to get access to the money. I see that now. I replied, the problem wasn't just that you were wrong about Chantel. Even if she had been the kindest person in the world, you had no right to humiliate me. She placed my wedding card on the table, the same one she had crumpled in her hand. It turned out she had saved it after our last meeting. The paper was smoothed out, but the creases were still there, like scars. I thought you might want this, she said. I took the card. I do want it now, I said. Not as proof of my place next to Jamal, but as a reminder that no one will ever again decide where I get to sit. Mama Rose nodded and left. Jamal reappeared a year after the divorce at an industry trade show. His company had a small booth, while my company was managing the logistics for the entire event. He approached me during a break. You got everything you ever wanted, he said. This isn't what I wanted. You have the big contracts, the house, the freedom. I had all of that before. I lost a marriage because you decided to turn me into an obstacle. Jamal finally admitted it. I was jealous of your business. You were growing, and my company was stuck. Chantel kept saying that together, we could win over your clients. So she had to sit next to you. Mama thought it would make you see things faster. I asked him, did it ever occur to you to just talk to me? Jamal replied, I was afraid you'd say no. I would have said no to handing over a client to a fake intermediary, but I could have helped you get your company out of debt. I know that now, he said. He looked at my employees walking by, greeting me warmly. I really did think your firm was just some small-time thing, because I never bothered to ask. I never hid it, I said. You just never considered my work to be real work. Jamal nodded. Before he walked away, he said, Chantel never could have been your equal. It was never about equality between women, I replied. It was about you seeing us as seats that you could just swap out. On the anniversary of the contract signing, Mrs. Jackson hosted a dinner for her key partners at the very same event complex. The main table was in a different hall, one without any pillars. A name card lay at every place. Mine was next to Mrs. Jackson and the venue owner, Mr. Henderson. Seeing the card, he smiled and asked, Is the seating to your satisfaction this time? I replied, yes, but I know now that it was never about the chair. Later that evening, I took the place card home with me and set it next to the crumpled one from the wedding. On the new one, my name was printed in gold letters. The old one was still scarred with creases. Both belonged to me, but neither one defined my worth. Mama Rose had put her son's mistress in my place, hoping to show me I was replaceable. Jamal had stayed silent, believing that love, business, and respect could be transferred along with a chair. They failed to notice the one person who was watching the whole humiliation, who already knew exactly who she would trust with her biggest contract. And that night, I finally understood. A woman's real place ain't next to a man who looks away. It's where her name is spoken with respect, and her work can't be shoved behind some column in the back.